What's that a picture of? I don't remember what that was from. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Let's see, who got first? Congrats on getting first, Turtle King. Welcome in. Waze Crusader. DT Zen. Hello, all. Don't mind the lag. I don't know why it's lagging so bad today, but my model is lagging. No, so while I was getting ready, there was a fly, this giant fly in my house, and it was dive bombing me, and it kept buzzing around my head, and I was trying to smack it out of the air with my hand because I didn't have anything really good to like smack it with, and it was big enough and slow enough that I figured I could do it. And it got really close to my face, and I yelled, "Come at me, fucker." Like really loudly, as I tried to duck out of the way, but also swatted out of the air. The good news is it's not around here anymore. I think it flew away. Went, oh, she's serious. It was like I looked and I'm like, oh my god, the it's not blocked out. I didn't mute it, and then I looked at my mic and I was like, oh, it's not on. I'm sure that would have gotten clipped. They really are. I was so annoyed. I don't know why it's like down here, and it was just being obnoxious and whatnot. But yeah. Stream wouldn't have even been live yet, and that would have been clipped. I'm opening my water. I've already restarted YouTube Studio like 3 times. Same with Bridger, and it's just being slow today. So it is what it is. Let's see. Let me pull up YouTube to see if I'm streaming. I am streaming. Awesome sauce. Okay, so today we are going to continue reading, maybe just a laggy network, maybe. Hello, Blaze, welcome in. Today we're going to continue reading and finish Five Little Peppers and How They Grew. We only have about 50 some odd pages left of the book, so it shouldn't take us too long. Ooh. So remember how yesterday we were talking about Magic the Gathering, and I was like, oh, I'm not playing this anymore because of blah, 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 blah reasons, right? I got my hands on 2 packs of the new Final Fantasy set. It's not even supposed to be out yet, I think. But the store had them out, and I was like, well, you're breaking street date, and I bought them. Ugh. And of course, the first pack I open, I have a Vincent card. Oh, the pre-release was this weekend? But only certain places, they should only have certain things though, right? They should only have like... Wait, this weekend coming up or last weekend? Pre-release was last weekend? Oh. Score. Well, then I managed to get my hand on 2, and it's not a lot in the area. I haven't seen it at my usual stores that I go to, so this store had it out, and is a store that's known to break street dates, so I wouldn't be surprised if it had been. But I pulled a Vincent card. Very happy. It wasn't him, but he's my favorite character. Most, if not all, cards are out. Well, like I said, not a single shop around me has cards out yet, unless it's the whatever the box is called. I can't remember. Anyway, anyway, I got a really good card. Okay. That I'm happy with. Yeah, I'm going to take the win. I'm like, all right, this card is more valuable than all the others put together and is worth more than the 2 sets I cost times like 4. So I'm going to be happy with that. Okay, so let's continue reading. So let's see. Let me try to. Let me try to. Okay, Phronsie went to go. Polly. Okay, Polly is with her friends, and she was starting to feel homesick. So he went to go get Phronsie. Mr. King went to go get Phronsie and brought her there so that she wouldn't be alone, because she knew that she would stop and then she wouldn't be able to play music and all that stuff. And we know that Mrs. Whitney adores Polly, and so do her sons. So here we go. Getting ready for Mamsie and the boys. And I'll tell you, Marion, what I'm going to do. Mr. King's voice was pitched on a higher key than usual, and extreme determination was expressed in every line of his face. He had met Mrs. Whitney at the foot of the staircase, dressed for paying visits. "Oh, are you going out?" he said, glancing impatiently at her attire. "And I'd just started to speak to you on a matter of great importance. Of the greatest importance indeed," he repeated irritably, as he stood with one gloved hand resting on the balustrade. "Oh, it's no matter, father," she replied pleasantly. "If it's really important, I can postpone going for another day, and—" "Really important," repeated the old gentleman irascibly. Forgot my book. I like that word, irascibly. "Haven't I just told you it's of the greatest importance? There's no time to be lost, and with my state of health, too, it's of the utmost consequence that I shouldn't be troubled. It's very bad for me. I should think you would realize that, Marion." "I'll tell Thomas to take the carriage directly back," said Mrs. Whitney, stepping to the door. "Or stay, father. I'll just run up and send the children out for a little drive. The horses ought to be used too, you know," she said lightly, preparing to run up to to carry out the changed plan. "Never mind that now," said Mr. King abruptly. "I want you to give me your attention directly." And walking towards the library door, getting a fresh accession of impatience with every step, he beckoned her to follow. But his progress was somewhat impeded by little Dick, or rather, little Dick and Prince, who were standing at the top of the stairs to see Mrs. Whitney off. When he saw his mother retrace her steps, supposing her yielding to the urgent entreaties that he was sending after her to stay at home, the child suddenly changed his good-byes to vociferous howls of delight, and speedily began to plunge down the stairs to welcome her. But the staircase was long, and little Dick was in a hurry, and besides, Prince was in the way. The consequence was, nobody knew just how, that a bumping noise struck into the conversation that made the two below in the hall look up quickly to see the child and dog come rolling over the stairs at a rapid rate. "Zounds!" cried the old gentleman. "Here, Thomas! Thomas!" But as that individual was waiting patiently outside the door of the carriage-box, there was small hope of his being in time to catch the boy, who was already in his mother's arms, not quite clear by the suddenness of the whole thing as to how he came there. "Oh, oh, Dickie's hurt!" cried somebody up above, followed by everyone within hearing distance, and all came rushing to the spot to ask 1,000 questions all in the same minute. There sat Mrs. Whitney in one of the big carved chairs, with little Dick in her lap, and Prince walking gravely around and around him with the greatest expression of concern on his noble face. Mr. King was storming up and down and calling on everybody to bring a bowl of water and some brown paper and be quick. What would any of that do? Interpolated with showers of blame on Prince for sitting on the stairs and tripping people up, while Dick meanwhile was laughing and chatting and enjoying the distinction of making so many people run, and of otherwise being the object of so much attention. "I don't think he was sitting on the stairs, father," said Jasper, who, when he saw that Dickie was really unhurt, began to vindicate his dog. "He never does that, do you, sir?" he said, patting the head that was lifted up to him, as if to be defended. "And I expect we shall all be killed some day, Jasper," said Mr. King, warming with his subject, and forgetting all about the brown paper and water which he had ordered, and which was now waiting for him at his elbow, just by that creature. "He's the noblest," began Jasper, throwing his arms around his neck, an example which was immediately followed by the Whitney boys and the two little Peppers. When Dick saw this, he began to struggle to get down to add himself to the number. "Where's the brown paper?" began Mr. King, seeing this and whirling around suddenly. "Hasn't anybody brought it yet?" "Here it is, sir," said Jane, handing him a generous supply. "Oh, I don't want to," cried little Dick in dismay, seeing his grandfather advance with an enormous piece of paper, which, previously wet in the bowl of water, was now unpleasantly clammy and wet. "Oh, no, I don't want to be all stuck up with old horrid wet paper." "Same." "Hush, dear," said his mamma, soothingly. "Grandpapa wants to put it on. There," as Mr. King dropped it scientifically on his head, and then proceeded to paste another one over his left eye. "And I hope they'll all drop off," cried Dick savagely, shaking his head to facilitate matters. "Yes, I do, every single one of 'em," he added, with an expression that, seen under the brown bits, was anything but benign. "Was Prince on the stairs, Dick?" asked Jasper, coming up and peering under his several adornments. "Tell us how you fell." "No," said little Dick crossly, and giving his head another shake. "He was up in the hall. Oh, dear, I want to get down." He began to stretch his legs and to struggle with so much energy that 2 or 3 pieces fell off and landed on the floor to his intense delight. "How did you fall, then?" said Jasper, perseveringly. "Can't you remember, Dickie boy?" "I pushed Princey," said Dick, feeling, with freedom from some of his encumbrances, more disposed for conversation, "and made him go ahead, and then I fell on top of him, that's all." "I guess Prince has saved him, father," cried Jasper, turning around with eyes full of pride and love on the dog, who was trying as hard as he could to tell all the children how much he enjoyed their caresses. And so it all came about that the consultation so summarily interrupted was never held, for as Mrs. Whitney was about to retire that evening, Mr. King rapped at her door on his way to bed. "Oh," he said, popping in his head in response to her invitation to come in, "it's nothing, only I thought I'd just tell you a word or two about what I've decided to do." "Do you mean what you wanted to see me about this afternoon?" asked Mrs. Whitney, who hadn't thought of it since. "Do come in, father." "It's no consequence," said the old gentleman. "No consequence at all," he repeated, waving his hand emphatically, "because I've made up my mind and arranged all my plans. It's only about the Peppers." I don't like how my model is moving like this. Okay. "The Peppers," repeated Mrs. Whitney. "Yes, well, the fact is, I'm going to have them here for a visit. The whole of them, you understand. That's all there is to it, and I shall go down to see about all the arrangements. Jasper and I, day after tomorrow," said the old gentleman, as if he owned the whole Pepper family inclusive, and was the only responsible person to be consulted about their movements. "Will they come?" asked Mrs. Whitney doubtfully. "Come, of course," said Mr. King sharply. "There isn't any other way. Or else Mrs. Pepper—" Hold up, I can't do this with this model anymore. Let's restart this bugger. This is obnoxious. Okay. Maybe. I don't know. Whatever. Or else Mrs. Pepper will be sending for her children, and of course, you know, Marian, we couldn't allow that. Well, that's all, so good night, and the door closed on his retreating footsteps. And so Polly and Phronsie soon knew that Mamsie and the boys were to be invited. Then the grand house, big as it was, didn't seem large enough to contain them. I declare, said Jasper next day, when they had been laughing and planning till they were all as merry as grigs, if this old dungeon don't begin to seem a little like the little brown house, Polly. "'Twon't," answered Polly, hopping around on one toe, followed by Phronsie, till Mamsie and the boys get here, Jasper King. "Well, they'll be here soon," said Jappy, pleased at Polly's exultation over it, "for we're going tomorrow to do the inviting." "And Polly's to write a note to slip into Marian," said Mr. King, putting his head in at the door, "and if you want your mother to come, child, why, you'd better mention it as strong as you can." "I'm going to write," said Phronsie, pulling up after a prolonged skip, all out of breath. "I'm going to write and beg Mamsie dear. Then she'll come, I guess." "I guess she will," said Mr. King, looking at her. "You go on, Phronsie, and write, and that letter shall go straight into my coat pocket alone by itself." "Shall it?" asked Phronsie, coming up to him. "And nobody will take it out till you give it to Mamsie?" "No, nobody shall touch it," said the old gentleman, stooping to kiss the upturned face, "till I put it into her own hand." "Then," said Phronsie, in the greatest satisfaction, "I'm going to write this very 1 minute." And she marched away to carry her resolve into immediate execution. Before they got through, they had quite a bundle of invitations and pleadings, for each of the 3 boys insisted on doing his part, so that when they were finally done up in an enormous envelope and put into Mr. King's hands, he told them with a laugh that there was no use for Jappy and himself to go, as those were strong enough to win almost anybody's consent. However, the next morning they set off, happy in their hopes, and bearing the countless messages which the children would come up every now and then to entrust to them, declaring that they had forgotten to put them in the letters. "You'd had to have an express wagon to carry the letters if you had put them all in at last," cried Jasper. "You've given us a bushel of things to remember." "And oh, don't forget to ask Ben to bring Cherry," cried Polly the last minute. The last minute as they were driving off, although she had put it in her letter at least a dozen times. "And oh dear, of course the flowers can't come." "We've got plenty here," said Jasper. "You would not know what to do with them, Polly." "Well, I do wish Mamsie would give some to kind Mrs. Henderson, then," said Polly on the steps, clasping her hands anxiously, while Jasper told Thomas to wait till he heard the rest of the message. "And to Grandma, you know, Grandma Bascom. She was so good to us," she said impulsively. "And oh, don't let her forget to carry some to dear, dear Mr. Fisher. And don't forget to give him our love, Jappy. Don't forget that." And Polly ran down the steps to the carriage door, where she gazed up imploringly to the boy's face. "I guess I won't," cried Jasper, "when I think how he saved your eyes, Polly. He's the best fellow I know," he finished in an impulsive burst. "And don't let Mamsie forget to carry some in to good old Mr. and Mrs. Beebe in town, where Phronsie got her shoes before. The consequence was that when the carriage did come, nobody heard it. Wait. Nope, I missed a page. Where Phronsie got her shoes, you know. That is, if Mamsie can," she added, remembering how very busy her mother would be. "I'll carry them myself," said Jasper. "We're going to stay over till the next day, you know." "Oh," cried Polly, radiant as a rose. "Will you really, Jappy? You're so good." "Yes, I will," said Jasper. "Everything you want done, Polly. Anything else? He asked quickly as Mr. King, impatient to be off, showed unmistakable symptoms of hurrying up Thomas. "Oh, no," said Polly. "Only do look at the little brown house, Jasper, as much as you can." And Polly left the rest unfinished. Jasper seemed to understand, however, for he smiled brightly as he said, looking into the brown eyes, "I'll do it all, Polly, every single thing." And then they were off. Take a break for a minute. Thank you for the posture checks, Lion, and for the hydrate. I didn't see it, sorry. My bad. I'll hydrate. My laundry is going. All right, let's see. Mamsie and the boys. Could Polly ever wait till the next afternoon that would bring the decision? Long before it was possibly time for the carriage to come back from the depot, Polly, with Phronsie and the three boys, who, improving Jasper's absence, had waited upon her with the grace and persistence of cavaliers of the olden time, were drawn up at the old stone gateway. No, I don't even know. I'm frozen again, and I am like 5 seconds from quitting stream because I'm so tired of this technology being absolute bullshit. Let's try this again. Quick haircut. Hi, Faded. Maybe. No, it's still lagging, but it seems to be slightly better than before. I'm doing. That's about all I can say right now. I am finna crash out. You don't even understand. I'm like, that is the exact way to put it, Silent. I'm 10 seconds from crashing out. My coworkers have been looking at me the last couple weeks and they're like, she's gonna crash out. And I'm like, I swear to God, I'm gonna lose it. Crash out of stream then. Oh. Let's see what I can read tonight. Where was I? Let's start this paragraph over because I have no idea what I said. Mamsie and the boys. Could Polly ever wait till the next afternoon that would bring the decision? Long before it was possibly time for the carriage to come back from the depot, Polly, with Phronsie and the three boys, who, improving Jasper's absence, had waited upon her with the grace and persistence of cavaliers of the olden time, were drawn up at the old stone gateway. "Oh dear," said Van with an impatient fling, "they never will come." "Won't they, Polly?" asked Phronsie, anxiously and standing quite still. "Dear me, yes," said Polly with a little laugh. Van only means they'll be a good while, Phronsie. They're sure to come sometime. Oh, said Phronsie, quite relieved, and she commenced her capering again in extreme enjoyment. I'm going, said little Dick, to run down and meet them. Accordingly off he went, and was immediately followed by Percy, who started with the laudable desire of bringing him back, but finding it so very enjoyable, he stayed himself and frolicked with Dick till the others, hearing the fun, all took hold of hands and flew off to join them. Now, said Polly, when they recovered their breath a little, let's all turn our backs to the road, and the minute we hear the carriage, we must whirl around, and the one who sees 'em first can ask first, is Mamsie coming? All right, cried the boys. Turn around, Dick, said Percy, with a little shove, for Dick was staring with all his might right down the road, and so they all flew around till they looked like 5 statues set up to grace the sidewalk. Suppose a big dog should come, suggested Van pleasantly, and snap at our backs. At this little Dick gave a small howl and turned around in a fright. There isn't any dog coming, said Polly. What does make you say such awful things, Van? I hear a noise, said Phronsie, and so they all whirled around in expectation. But it proved to be only a market wagon coming at a furious pace down the road with somebody's belated dinner. So they all had to whirl back again as before. The consequence was that when the carriage did come, nobody heard it. Jasper, looking out, was considerably astonished to see, drawn up in solemn array with their backs to the road, 5 children who stood as if completely petrified. What in the world, he began, and called to Thomas to stop, whose energetic whoa, reaching the ears of the frozen line, caused it to break ranks and spring into life at an alarming rate. Oh, is she coming, Jappy? Is she? Is she? They all screamed together, swarming up to the carriage door and over the wheels. Yes, said Jasper, looking at Polly. At that, Phronsie made a little cheese and sat right down on the pavement in an ecstasy. Get in here, all of you, said Jasper merrily. Help Polly in first. For shame, Dick, don't scramble so. Dick always shoves, said Percy, escorting Polly up with quite an air. I don't either, said Dick. You pushed me awful, just a little while ago, he added indignantly. Do say awfully, corrected Van, crowding up to get in. You leave off your lees so, he finished critically. I don't know anything about any lees, said little Dick, who, usually so good-natured, was now thoroughly out of temper. I want to get in and go home, and he showed evident symptoms of breaking into a perfect uproar. There, said Polly, lifting him up. There he goes. Now 1, 2, 3. And little Dick was spun in so merrily that the tears changed into a happy laugh. Now then, bundle in, all the rest of you, put in Mr. King, who seemed to be in the best of spirits. That's it. Go on, Thomas. When are they coming? Polly found time to ask in the general jumble. In 3 weeks from tomorrow, said Jasper. And everything's all right, Polly, and the whole of them, Cherry and all, will be here then. Oh, said Polly. Here we are, cried Van, jumping out almost before the carriage door was open. Mamma, Mamma, he shouted to Mrs. Whitney in their doorway. The Peppers are coming, and the little brown house, too. Everything and everybody. They are, said Percy, as wild as his brother, and everything's just splendid. Jappy said so. Everything's coming, said little Dick, tumbling up the steps. And the bird, and Mamsie, finished Phronsie, impatient to add her part, while Polly didn't say anything, only looked. 3 weeks. I can't wait, thought Polly at first, in counting over the many hours before the happy day would come. But on Jasper's suggesting that they should all do something to get ready for the visitors, and have a general trimming up with vines and flowers beside, the time passed away much more rapidly than was feared. Polly chose a new and more difficult piece of music to learn to surprise Mamsie. Phronsie had aspired to an elaborate pincushion that was nearly done, made of bits of worsted and canvas, over whose surface she had wandered according to her own sweet will, in a way charming to behold. I don't know what to do, said Van in despair, 'cause I don't know what she'd like. Can't you draw her little picture? Asked Polly. She'd like that. Does she like pictures? Asked Van with the greatest interest. Yes, indeed, said Polly. I guess you'd think so if you could see her. I know what I shall do, with a dignified air, said Percy, who couldn't draw, and therefore looked down on all Van's attempts with the greatest scorn. And won't be any old pictures either, he added. What is it, old fellow? Asked Jasper. Tell on, now, your grand plan. Hello, Lucifer, the CEO. Welcome in. Welcome to class. Thank you for the follow. Hold up. I'm going to reset everything on my phone. Okay, calibrate phone. We good now? More or less. Less, but whatever. Okay. No, I'm not going to tell, said Percy, with the greatest secrecy, until the very day. What will you do, sir? Asked Jasper, pulling one of Dick's ears, who stood waiting to speak, as if his mind was made up, and wouldn't be changed for anyone. I shall give Ben one of my kitties, the littlest and the best, he said, with heroic self-sacrifice. A perfect shout greeted this announcement. No, I'm not going to crash out. I'm going to attempt to get the book done. I'll do my crashing out after stream. Yeah. Fancy Ben going round with one of those awful little things, whispered Jappy to Polly, who shook at the very thought. Thank you. Don't laugh. Oh, it's dreadful to laugh at him, Jappies, she said, when she couldn't voice enough. No, I shan't tell, said Percy, when the fun had subsided, who, finding that no one teased him to divulge his wonderful plan, kept trying to harrow up their feelings by parading it. You needn't, then, screamed Van, who was nearly dying to know. I don't believe it's so very dreadful much, anyway. What's yours, Jappy? Asked Polly. I know yours will be just splendid. Oh, no, it isn't, said Jasper, smiling brightly. But as I didn't know what better I could do, I'm going to get a little stand and then beg some flowers of Turner to fill it, and— Why, that's mine! Screamed Percy in the greatest disappointment. That's just what I was going to do. Ho, ho, shouted Van. I thought you wouldn't tell, Mr. Percy. Ho, ho, ho. Ho, ho, echoed Dick. Hush, said Jappy. Why, Percy, I didn't know as you had thought of that, he said kindly. Well, then, you do it, and I'll take something else. I don't care as long as Mrs. Pepper gets 'em. I didn't exactly mean that, began Percy. Mine was roots and little flowers growing. He means what he gets in the woods, said Polly, explaining. Don't you, Percy? Yes, said the boy, and then I was going to put stones and things in them to make them look pretty. And they will, cried Jasper. Go ahead, Percy. They'll look real pretty, and then Turner will give you some flowers for the stand, I know. I'll ask him tomorrow. Will you? Cried Percy. That'll be fine. Mine is the best, said Van, just at this juncture, but it was said a little anxiously, as he saw how things were prospering with Percy, for my flowers in the picture will always be there, and your old roots and things will die. What will yours be, then, Jappy? Asked Polly, very soberly. The stand of flowers would have been just lovely, and you do fix them so nice, she added sorrowfully. Oh, I'll find something else, said Jappy cheerfully, who had quite set his heart on giving the flowers. Let me see. I might carve her a bracket. Do, cried Polly, clapping her hands enthusiastically, and do carve a little bird like the one you did on your father's. I will, said Jasper, just exactly like it. Now we've got something to do before we welcome the little brown house people, so let's fly at it, and the time won't seem so long. And at last the day came when they could all say, "Tomorrow they'll be here." Well, the vines were all up, and pots of lovely climbing ferns and all manner of pretty green things had been arranged and rearranged a dozen times till everything was pronounced perfect, and a big green welcome over the library door, made of laurel leaves, by the patient fingers of all the children, stared down into their admiring eyes as much as to say, "I'll do my part." "Oh dear," said Phronsie, when evening came, and the children were, as usual, assembled on the rug before the fire, their tongues running wild with anticipation and excitement. "I don't mean to go to bed at all, Polly. I don't, truly." "Oh, yes, you do," said Polly, laughing. "Then you'll be all fresh and rested to see Mammy tomorrow when she comes." "Oh, no," said Phronsie, shaking her head soberly, and speaking in an injured tone. "I'm not one bit tired, Polly, not one bit." "You needn't go yet, Phronsie," said Polly. "You can sit up half an hour if you want to." "But I don't want to go to bed at all," said the child anxiously. "When I may be asleep when Mamsie comes, Polly." "She's afraid she won't wake up," said Percy, laughing. "Oh, there'll be oceans of time before they come, Phronsie." "What is oceans?" asked Phronsie, coming up and looking at him doubtfully. "He means Mamsie won't get here till afternoon," said Polly, catching her up and kissing her. "Then I guess you'll be awake, Phronsie pet." So Phronsie allowed herself to be persuaded, at the proper time, to be carried off and inducted into her little nightgown. And when Polly went up to bed, she found the little pincushion, with its hieroglyphics that she had insisted on taking to bed with her, still tightly grasped in the little fat hand. "She'll roll over and muss it," thought Polly, "and then she'll feel bad in the morning. I guess I'd better lay it on the bureau." So she drew it carefully away without waking the little sleeper, and placed it where she knew Phronsie's eyes would rest on it first thing in the morning. It was going on towards the middle of the night when Phronsie, whose exciting dreams of Mamsie and the boys wouldn't let her rest quietly, woke up, and in the very first flash she thought of her cushion. "Why, where?" she said in the softest little tones, only half awake. "Why, Polly, where is it?" She began to feel all around her pillow to see if it had fallen down there. But Polly's brown head, with its crowd of anticipations and busy plans, was away off in dreamland, and she breathed on, perfectly motionless. "I guess I better," said Phronsie to herself, now thoroughly awake and sitting up in bed, "not wake her up. Poor Polly's tired. I could find it myself. I know I can." So she slipped out of bed and, prowling around on the floor, felt all about for her little cushion. "'Tisn't here? Oh, no, it isn't," she sighed at last. And getting up, she stood still a moment, lost in thought. "Maybe Jane's put it out in the hall," she said, as a bright thought struck her. "I can get it there." And out she pattered over the soft carpet to the table at the end of the long hall, where Jane often placed the children's playthings overnight. As she was coming back after her fruitless search, she stopped to peep over the balustrade down the fascinating flight of stairs, now so long and dark. Just then a little faint ray of light shot up from below and met her eyes. "Why," she said in gentle surprise, "they're all downstairs. I guess they're making something for Mamsie. I'm going to see." So carefully picking her way up over the stairs with her little bare feet and holding on to the balustrade at every step, she went slowly down, guided by the light, which, as she neared the bottom of the flight, she saw come from the library door. "Oh, isn't it funny?" And she gave a little happy laugh. "They won't know I'm coming." And now the soft little feet went pattering over the thick carpet until she stood just within the door. There she stopped. Oh, who knows what's happening now? And there she stopped, perfectly still. Two dark figures, big and powerful, were bending over something that Phronsie couldn't see between the two big windows. A lantern on the floor hung its rays over them as they were busily occupied, and the firelight from the dying coals made the whole stand out distinctly to the gaze of the motionless little figure. "Why, what are you doing with my grandpa's things?" The soft, clear notes fell like a thunderbolt upon the men. With a start they brought themselves up and stared, only to see a little white-robed figure with its astonished eyes uplifted with childlike, earnest gaze as she waited for her answer. For an instant they were powerless to move, and stood as if frozen to the spot, till Phronsie, moving one step forward, piped forth, "Naughty men, to touch my dear grandpa's things." With a smothered cry, one of them started forward, with arm uplifted, but the other sprang like a cat and intercepted the blow. "Stop," was all he said. A noise above the stairs, a rushing sound through the hall. Something will save Phronsie, for the household is aroused. The two men sprang through the window, having no time to catch the lantern or their tools, as Polly, followed by one and another, rushed in and surrounded the child. "What?" gasped Polly, and got no further. "Stop! Thief!" roared Mr. King, hurrying over the stairs. The children, frightened at the strange noises, began to cry and scream as they came running through the halls to the spot. Jasper rushed for the men servants, and there stood Phronsie, surrounded by the pale group. "'Twas two naughty men," she said, lifting her little face with the grieved, astonished look still in the big brown eyes. "And they were touching my grandpa's things, Polly." "I should think they were," said Jasper, running over amongst the few scattered tools and the lantern, to the window where, on the floor, was a large table covered hastily, caught up by the corners, onto which a vast variety of silver, jewelry, and quantities of costly articles were gathered ready for flight. "They've broken open your safe, Father," he cried in excitement. "See?" And they put up their hand. "One man did," went on Phronsie, and the other said, "Stop! Oh, Polly, you hurt me," she cried, as Polly, unable to bear the strain any longer, held her so tightly she could hardly breathe. "Go on," said Jasper. "How did they look?" "All black," said the child, pushing back her wavy hair and looking up at him. "Very all black, Jasper." "And their faces, Phronsie?" said Mr. King, getting down on his old knees on the floor beside her. "Bless me, somebody else ask her. I can't talk." "Well, anyway, I'd have caught 'em, so there," he said. The pages are sticky. Here we go. "How did their faces look, Phronsie, dear?" asked Jasper, taking one of the cold hands in his. "Can't you think?" "Oh," said Phronsie, and then she gave a funny little laugh. "Two big holes, Jasper, that's all they had." "She means they were masked," whispered Jasper. "What did you get up for?" Mrs. Whitney asked. "Dear child, what made you get out of bed?" "Why, my pincushion," said Phronsie, looking worried at once. "I couldn't find it, and—" But just at this, without a bit of warning, Polly tumbled over in a dead faint. And then it was all confusion again. And so on the following morning it turned out that the Peppers, about whose coming there had been so many plans and expectations, just walked in as if they had always lived there. The greater excitement completely swallowed up the less. Chaos reigns. Let's see, next chapter, which treats of good many matters. How many chapters are left? 1, 2, 3. I think there's 4 chapters left. 3 or 4. Yeah, we're very near the end. It looks like just 3. Which treats of good many matters. "Pooh," said Joel, a few mornings after the emptying of the little brown house into the big one, when he and Van were rehearsing for the 50th time all the points of the eventful night. "Pooh, if I'd been there, they wouldn't get away, I guess." "What would you have done?" asked Van, bristling up at his reflection on their courage and squaring up to him. What would you have done, Joel Pepper? I'd have pitched right into him like everything, said Joel valiantly, and have caught him. Yes, every single one of the bunglers. The what? Said Van, bursting into a loud laugh. The bunglers, said Joel with a red face. That's what you said they were, anyway, he added positively. The bunglers, said Joel with a red face. Wait, I said burglars, said Van, doubling up with amusement while Joel stood, a little sturdy figure, regarding him with anything but a sweet countenance. Well, anyway, I'd have caught 'em, so there, he said, as Van at last showed signs of coming out of his fit of laughter, and got up and wiped his eyes. How'd you caught 'em? Asked Van, scornfully surveying the square little crunchy figure before him. You can't hit any. Can't I? Said Joel, the black eyes flashing volumes and coming up in front of Van. You better believe I can, Joel Whitney. Come out in the backyard and try, then, said Van hospitably, perfectly delighted at the prospect, and flying alone towards the door. Come right out and try. All right, said Joel, following sturdily, equally delighted to show his skill. There, said Van, taking off his jacket and flinging it on the grass, while Joel immediately followed suit with his little homespun one. Now we can begin perfectly splendid. I won't hit hard, he added patronizingly, as both boys stood ready. It is hard as you've a mind to, said Joel. I'm a-going to. Oh, you may, said Van politely, because you're company. All right, now. And so at it they went. Before very many minutes were over, Van relinquished all ideas of treating his company with extra consideration, and was only thinking how he could possibly hold his own with the valiant little country lad. Oh, if he could only be called to his lessons, anything that would summon him into the house. Just then a window over their heads was suddenly thrown up, and his mamma's voice, in natural surprise and distress, called quickly, Children, what are you doing? Oh, Van, how could you? Both contestants turned around suddenly. Joel looked up steadily. We're a-hittin', ma'am. He said I couldn't, and so we came out and— Oh, Vanny, said Mrs. Whitney reproachfully, to treat a little guest in this way. I wanted to, said Joel cheerfully. 'Twas great fun. Let's begin again, Van. We mustn't, said Van, readily giving up the charming prospect, and beginning to edge quickly towards the house. Mamma wouldn't like it, you know. He hits splendidly. Mamma, he added generously, looking up, he does really. And so does Van, cried Joel, his face glowing at the praise. We'll come out every day, he added, slipping into his jacket and turning enthusiastically back to Van. And perhaps he could have pitched into the burglars, finished Van, ignoring the invitation, and tumbling into his jacket with alarming speed. I know I could, cried Joel, scampering after him into the house, if I'd only have been there. Where's Ben? Said Van, bounding into the hall and flinging himself down on one of the chairs. Oh, dear, I'm so hot. Say, Ben, say, Joe, where do you suppose Ben is? I don't know, replied Joel, who didn't even puff. I saw him a little while ago with Master Percy, said Jane, who was going through the hall. There now, and they've gone off somewhere, cried Van in extreme irritation, and starting up quickly. I know they have. Which way did they go, Jane, and how long? Oh, I don't know, replied Jane carelessly. Half an hour, maybe, and they didn't go nowhere as I see. At least they were talking at the door, and I was going upstairs. Right here, cried Van, and stamping with his foot to point out the exact place. At this door, Jane. Yes, yes, said Jane, at that very door. And then she went into the dining room to her work. Oh, dear me, cried Van, and flying out on the veranda, he began to peer wildly and up and down the drive. And they've gone to some splendid place, I know, and they wouldn't tell us. That's just like Percy, he added vindictively. He's always stealing away. Don't you see him, Joel? Oh, do come out and look. 'Tisn't any use, said Joel coolly, sitting down on the chair Van had just vacated and swinging his feet comfortably. They're miles away if they've been gone half an hour. I'm going upstairs, he said, and sprang up and energetically pranced to the stairs. They're upstairs, screamed Van in scorn, bounding into the hall. Don't go. I know that they've gone down to the museum. The what? Exclaimed Joel, nearly at the top, peering over the railing. What's that you said? What is it? A museum, shouted Van. And it's a perfectly elegant place, Joel Pepper, and Percy knows I like to go, and now he's taken Ben off, and he'll show him all the things, and they'll all be old when I take him, and oh, I hope the snakes will bite him, he added, trying to think of something bad enough. Do they have snakes there? Asked Joel, staring. Yes, they do, snapped out Van. They have everything. Well, they shan't bite Ben, cried Joel in terror. Oh, do you suppose they will? And he turned right straight around on the stairs and looked at Van. No, said Van, they won't bite. What's the matter, Joe? Oh, they may, said Joel, his face working, and screwing both eyes into his fists. At last he burst out into a torrent of sobs. Oh, don't let 'em, Van, don't. Why, they can't, said Van in an emphatic voice, running up the stairs to Joel's side, frightened to death at his tears. Then he began to shake his jacket sleeve violently to bring him back to reason. Wait, Joe. Oh, do stop. Oh, dear. What shall I do? I tell you, they can't bite, he screamed as loud as he could into his ear. You said you hoped they would, said Joel's voice in smothered tones. Well, they won't anyway, said Van decidedly, 'cause they're all stuffed. So there now. Ain't thee alive, or nothin'? Asked Joel, bringing one black eye into sight from behind his chubby hands. No, said Van. They're just as dead as anything, Joel Pepper. Been dead years, and there's old crabs there, too. Old dead crabs, and they're just lovely. Oh, such a lot of eggs as they've got. And there are shells and bugs and stones and an awful old crocodile and... Oh, dear, sighed Joel, perfectly overcome at such a vision, and sitting down on the stairs to think. Well, Mamsie'll know where Ben is, he said, springing up. And then I tell you, Van, we'll just tag 'em. So she will, cried Van. Why didn't we think of that before? I wanted to think. You fell asleep? That's good. I'm getting sleepy too. I'm not gonna lie, I keep yawning. Like, please let the book end. I did, said Joel. That's where I was going. Without any more ado, they rushed into Mrs. Pepper's big sunny room, there to see, seated at the square table between the two large windows, the two lost ones bending over what seemed to be an object of the greatest importance, for Polly was hanging over Ben's shoulder with intense pride and delight, which she couldn't possibly conceal, and Davy was crowded as near as he could get to Percy's elbow. Phronsie and little Dick were perched comfortably on the corner of the table, surveying the whole scene in quiet rapture, and Mrs. Pepper, with her big mending basket, was ensconced over by the deep window seat just on the other side of the room, underneath Cherry's cage, and looking up between quick, energetic stitches over at the busy group with the most placid expression on her face. Oh, what you doin'? Cried Joel, flying up to them. Let us see. Do, Ben. What is it? Exclaimed Van, squeezing in between Percy and Ben. Don't, began Percy. There, see, you've knocked his elbow and spoiled it. Oh, no, he hasn't, said Ben, putting down his pencil and taking up a piece of rubber. There, see, it all comes out, as good as ever. Isn't it just elegant? Said Percy in the most pleased tone, and wriggling his toes under the table to express his satisfaction. Yes, said Van, craning his neck to see a better view of the picture, now nearly completed. It's perfectly splendid. How'd you do it, Ben? I don't know, replied Ben with a smile, carefully shading in the last few touches. It just drew itself. 'Tisn't anything Tisn't anything to what he can do, said Polly, standing up as tall as she could and beaming at Ben. He used to draw most beautiful at home. Better than this? Asked Van with great respect, and taking up the picture after some demur on Percy's part and examining it critically. I don't believe it, Polly. Oh, he did, exclaimed Joel, looking over his shoulder at a wonderful view of a dog in an extremely excited state of mind, running down an interminable hill to bark at a locomotive and train of cars whizzing along a curve in the foreground. Lots better than that. Ben can do anything, he added in an utterly convincing way. Now give it back, cried Percy, holding out his hand in alarm. I'm going to ask Mamma to have it framed, and then I'm going to hang it right over my bed, he finished, as Van reluctantly gave up the treasure. Did you draw all the time in the little brown house? He asked Van, lost in thought. How I wish I'd been there. Dear no, cried Polly with a little skip, turning away to laugh. He didn't have hardly any time, and why not? Asked Percy. Because there were things to do, said Polly. But sometimes when it rained and he couldn't go out and work, and there wasn't anything to do in the house, then we'd have, oh, and she drew a long breath at the memory, such a time you can't think. Didn't you wish it would always rain? Asked Van, still gazing at the picture. Dear no, began Polly. I didn't, broke in Joel in horror. I wouldn't have had it rain for anything. Only once in a while, he added, as he thought of the good times that Polly had spoken of. 'Twas nice outdoors, said little Davy reflectively, and nice inside, too. And then he glanced over it to his mother, who gave him a smile in return, and 'twas nice always. Well, said Van, returning to the picture, I do wish you'd tell me how to draw, Ben. I can't do anything but flowers, he said in a discouraged way. Flowers aren't anything, said Percy pleasantly. That's girls' work. But dogs and horses and cars, those are just good. Will you, Ben? Asked Van, looking up into the big blue eyes so kindly turned up to his. Yes, indeed I will, cried Ben. That is all I know. 'Tisn't much, but everything I can, I'll tell you. Then I can learn, can't I? Cried Van joyfully. Oh, tell me too, Ben, cried Percy. Will you? I want to learn too. And me, cried Dick, bending forward, nearly upsetting Phronsie as he did so. Yes, say I may, Ben, do. You're too little, began Percy, but Ben nodded his head at Dick, which caused him to clap his hands and return to his original position, satisfied. Well, I guess we're going to, too, said Joel. Dave and me, there isn't anybody going to learn without us. Of course not, said Polly. Ben wouldn't leave you out, Joey. Phronsie sat quite still all this time in the corner of the table, her feet tucked up under her and her hands clasped in her lap, and never said a word. But Ben, looking up, saw the most grieved expression settling on her face, as the large eyes were fixed in wonder on the faces before her. And there's my pet, he cried in enthusiasm, and reaching over the table, he caught hold of one of the little fat hands. Why, we couldn't think of getting along without her. She shall learn to draw. She shall. Really, Bensie? Said Phronsie, the sunlight breaking all over the gloomy little visage, and setting the brown eyes to dancing. Real, true, splendid pictures? Yes, the splendidest, said Ben. The very splendidest pictures, Phronsie Pepper, you ever saw. Oh, cried Phronsie. Before anyone knew what she was about, she tripped right into the middle of the table, over the papers and everything, and gave a happy little whirl. Dear me, Phronsie, cried Polly, catching her up and hugging her. You mustn't dance on the table. I'm going to learn, said Phronsie, coming out of Polly's embrace, to draw whole pictures, all alone by myself. Ben said so. I know it, said Polly, and then you shall draw one for Mamsie. You shall. I will, said Phronsie, dreadfully excited. I'll draw her a cow and 2 chickens, Polly, just like Grandma Bascom's. Yes, whispered Polly, but don't you tell her yet till you get it done, Phronsie. I won't, said Phronsie in the loudest of tones, but putting her mouth close to Polly's ear. And then she will be so surprised, Polly, won't she? And then came Jasper's voice at the door. Can I come in? Oh, do, Jappy, cried Polly, rushing along with Phronsie in her arms to open the door. We're so glad you've got home. So am I, said Jasper, coming in, his face flushed and his eyes sparkling. I thought Father never would be through downtown, Polly. We're going to learn to draw, said Percy, over by the table, who wouldn't on any account leave his seat by Ben, though he was awfully tired of sitting still so long, for fear somebody else would hop into it. Ben's going to teach us. Yes, he is, put in Van, bounding up to Jasper and pulling at all the buttons on his jacket he could reach to command attention. And us, said Joel, coming up too. You forgot us, Van. The whole of us, every single one of this in this room, said Van decidedly, all except Mrs. Pepper. Hello, said Jasper. That is a class. Jasper, that is a clasp. Class. Not clasp, class. Well, Professor Ben, you've got to teach me then, for I'm coming too. You, said Ben, turning around in his chair and looking at him. I can't teach you anything, Jappy. You know everything already. Let him come anyway, said Polly, hopping up and down. Oh, I'm coming, Professor, laughed Jasper. Never you fear, Polly. I'll be on hand when the rest of the class comes in. And Van, said Mrs. Pepper, pausing a minute in her work, smiling over at him in a lull in the chatter, I think flowers are most beautiful. She pointed to a little framed picture on the mantel of the bunch of buttercups and one huge rose that Van had with infinite patience drawn and then colored to suit his fancy. Do you? Cried Van, perfectly delighted, and leaving the group he rushed up to her side. Do you really think they're nice, Mrs. Pepper? Of course I do, said Mrs. Pepper briskly, and beaming on him. I think everything of them, and I shall keep them as long as I live, Van. Well then, said Van, very much pleased, I shall paint you ever so many more, just as many as you want. Do, said Mrs. Pepper, taking up her work again, and I'll hang them up, every one. Yes, I will, said Van, and I'll go right to work on one tomorrow. What you mending our jackets for? She asked abruptly as a familiar hole caught his attention. Because they're torn, said Mrs. Pepper cheerfully, and they won't mend themselves. Why don't you let Jane? He persisted. She always does them. Jane's got enough to do, replied Mrs. Pepper, smiling away as hard as she could. And I haven't, so I'm going to look around and pick up something to keep my hands out of mischief as much as I can while I'm here. Do you ever get into mischief? Asked little Dick, coming up and looking into Mrs. Pepper's face wonderingly. Why, you're a big woman. Dear me, yes, said Mrs. Pepper. The bigger you are, the more mischief you can get into. You'll find that out, Dickie. And then do you have to stand in a corner? Asked Dick, determined to find out just what were the consequences and reverting to his most dreaded punishment. No, said Mrs. Pepper, laughing. Corners are for little folks, but when people who know better do wrong, there aren't any corners they can creep into, or they'd get into them pretty quick. I wish, said little Dick, you'd let me get into your lap. That would be a nice corner. Do, Mamsie, said Polly, coming up. That's just the way I used to feel, and I'll finish the mending. So Mrs. Pepper put down her work and moved the big basket for little Dick to clamber up. When he laid his head contentedly back in her motherly arms with a sigh of happiness, Phronsie regarded him with a very grave expression. At last she drew near. I'm tired. Do, Mamsie, take me. So Mamsie will, said Mrs. Pepper, opening her arms, when Phronsie immediately crawled up into their protective shelter with a happy little crow. Oh, now tell us a story, Mrs. Pepper, cried Van. Please, please do. No, no, exclaimed Percy, scuttling out of his chair and coming up. Let's talk of the little brown house. Do tell us what you used to do there. That's the best. So it is, cried Van. All the nice times you used to have in it. Wait, just a minute, do. And he ran back for a cricket, which he placed at Mrs. Pepper's feet, and then sitting down on it, which he leaned on her comfortable lap in order to hear better. Wait for me, too, till I get a chair, called Percy, starting. Don't begin till I get there. Here, let me, Percy, said Ben, and he drew forward a big easy chair that the boy was tugging at with all his might. Now I'm ready, too, said Polly, setting small finishing stitches quickly with a merry little flourish, and drawing her chair nearer her mother's as she spoke. The picture shows all of the kids either on her lap or in a circle around her. Now begin, please, said Van. All the nice times you know. She couldn't tell all the nice times if she had 10 years to tell them in, could she, Polly? Said Jasper. Well, in the first place, then, said Mrs. Pepper, clearing her throat, the little brown house had got to be, you know, so we made up our minds to make it just the nicest brown house that ever was. And it was, declared Jasper, with an emphatic ring to his voice, the very nicest place in the whole world. Oh dear, broke in Van enviously. Jappy's always said so. I wished we had been there, too. We didn't want anybody but Jappy, said Joel, not very politely. Oh, Joey, for shame, cried Polly. Jappy used to bake, cried little Davy. And we all made pies, and then we sat around and ate 'em, and then told stories. Oh, what fun, cried Percy. Do tell us. So the 5 little Peppers and Jasper flew off into reminiscences and accounts of the funny things, and Mrs. Pepper joined in heartily till the room got very merry with the glee and enthusiasm called forth, so much so that nobody heard Mrs. Whitney knock gently at the door, and when nobody answering, she was obliged to come in by herself. Well, well, she cried merrily, looking at the swarm of little ones around Mrs. Pepper and in the big chair. You are having a nice time. May I come and listen? Oh, if you will, sister, cried Jasper, springing off from his arm of the chair, while Ben flew from the other side to hurry and get her a chair. Percy and Van rushed too, knocking over so many things that they didn't help much, and little Dick poked his head out from Mrs. Pepper's arms when he saw his mamma sitting down to stay, and began to scramble down to get into her lap. There now, said Mrs. Whitney, smiling over at Mrs. Pepper, who was smiling at her. You have your baby, and I have mine. Now, children, what's it all about? What has Mrs. Pepper been telling you? Oh, the little brown house, cried Dickie, his cheeks all aflame. The dearest little house, Mamma. I wish I could live in one. 'Twouldn't be the same without the Peppers in it, said Jasper. Not a bit of it. And they had such perfectly elegant times, cried Percy. I think they all love this word, elegant. They're using it a lot. Enviously drawing up to her side. Oh, you can't think, Mamma. Well, now, said his mamma, do go on and let me hear some of the nice times. So away they launched again, and Mrs. Whitney was soon enjoying it as hugely as the children, when a heavy step sounded in the middle of the room, and a voice spoke in such a tone that everybody skipped. Well, I should like to know what all this means. I've been all over the house, and not a trace of anybody could I find. Oh, father, cried Mrs. Whitney. Van, dear, get up and get Grandpapa a chair. No, no, said the old gentleman, waving him off impatiently. I'm not going to stay. I must go and lie down. My head is in a bad condition today. Very bad indeed, he added. Oh, said Phronsie, popping up her head and looking at him. I must get right down. What's the matter, Phronsie? asked Mrs. Pepper, trying to hold her back. Oh, but I must, said Phronsie, energetically wriggling. My poor sick man wants me. He does. And flying out of her mother's arms, she ran up to Mr. King, and standing on tiptoe, said softly, I'll rub your head, Grandpa dear. Poor sick man. Yes, I will. And you're the best child, cried the old gentleman, catching her up and marching over to the other side of the room where there was a lounging chair. There now, you and I, Phronsie, will stay by ourselves. Then my head will feel better. And he sat down and drew her into his arms. Does it ache very bad? Said Phronsie in a soft little voice. Then reaching up, she began to pat and smooth it gently with one little hand. Very bad, dear Grandpa? Have a good night, Faded. It won't, said the old gentleman, if you only keep on taking care of it, little Phronsie. Then, said the child, perfectly delighted, I'm going to take all care of you, Grandpa, always. So you shall, cried Mr. King, no less delighted than she was. Mrs. Pepper. Sir, said Mrs. Pepper, trying to answer, which she couldn't do very well, surrounded as she was by the crowd of little chatterers. Yes, sir, excuse me, what is it, sir? We've got to come to an understanding about this thing, said the old gentleman, and I can't talk much today because my headache won't allow it. Same, dude. Same. Here the worried look came into Phronsie's face again, and she began to try to smooth his head with both little hands. And so I must say it all in as few words as possible, he continued. What is it, sir? Again asked Mrs. Pepper, wonderingly. Well, the fact is, I've got to have somebody who will keep this house. Now, Marian, not a word, as he saw symptoms of Mrs. Whitney's joining in the conversation. You've been good, just as good as can be under the circumstances, but Mason will be home in the fall, and then I suppose you'll have to go with him. Now said the old gentleman, forgetting all about his head and straightening himself up suddenly in the chair, am going to get things into shape so that the house will be kept for all of us, so that we can come or go. And how can I do it better than to have the Peppers, you, Mrs. Pepper, and all your children, come here and live and— Oh, father! Cried Jasper, rushing up to him and flinging his arms around his neck. He gave him such a hug as he hadn't received for many a day. Goodness, Jasper, cried his father, feeling of his throat. How can you express your feelings so violently? And besides, you interrupt. Beg pardon, sir, said Jasper, swallowing his excitement and trying to control his eagerness. Do you say yes, Mrs. Pepper? Queried the old gentleman impatiently. I must get this thing fixed up today. I'm really too ill to be worried, ma'am. Why, sir, stammered Mrs. Pepper, I don't know what to say. I couldn't think of imposing all my children on you, and imposing? Who's talking of imposing? Hold on. Okay, I think that's a little better for something. It keeps disconnecting. B. Bridger keeps disconnecting from VTube Studio. I think that's what's wrong with half the issues. Yeah. It's obnoxious. I don't know what to say. I couldn't think of imposing. Who's talking of imposing? Said Mr. King in a loud key. I want my house kept. Will you live here and keep it? That is the question. But, sir, began Mrs. Pepper again, you don't think— I do think. I tell you, ma'am, I do think, snapped the old gentleman. It's just because I have thought that I've made up my mind. Will you do it, Mrs. Pepper? What you going to do, Mamsie? Asked Joel quickly. I don't know as I'm going to do anything yet, said poor Mrs. Pepper, who was almost stunned. To come here and live, cried Jasper, unable to keep still any longer, and springing to the children. Don't you want to, Joe? To live? Screamed Joel. Oh, Wickety, yes, do, Ma, do come here and live, do. To live, echoed Phronsie, over in the old gentleman's lap, in this beautiful place? Oh, Mamsie, that was all Polly could say. And even Ben had his arms around his mother's neck, whispering "do" into her ear, while little Davy got into her lap and teased her with all his might. What shall I do? Cried the poor woman. Did ever anybody see the like? It's the very best thing you could possibly do, cried the old gentleman. Don't you see it's for the children's advantage? They'll get such educations, Mrs. Pepper, as you want for them, and it accommodates me immensely. What obstacle can there be to it? If I was only sure 'twas best, said Mrs. Pepper doubtfully. Oh, dear Mrs. Pepper, said Mrs. Whitney, laying her hands on hers. Can you doubt it? Then, said Mr. King, getting up, but still holding on to Phronsie, we'll consider it settled. This is your home, children, he said, waving his hand at the 5 little Peppers in a bunch, and having thus summarily disposed of the whole business, he marched out with Phronsie on his shoulder. This is a man who just does what he wants. Polly's dismal morning. 2 chapters left. Everything had gone wrong with Polly that day. It began with her boots. Of all the things in the world that tried Polly's patience most were the troublesome little black buttons that originally adorned those useful parts of her clothing, and that were fondly supposed to be there when needed, but they never were. The little black things seemed to be invested with a special spite, for one by one they would hop off on the slightest provocation, and go rolling over the floor just when she was in her most terrible hurry, compelling her to fly for needle and thread in an instant. For one thing Mrs. Pepper was very strict about, and that was Polly should do nothing else till the buttons were all on again, and the boots buttoned up firm and snug. "Oh, dear," said Polly, sitting down on the floor and pulling on her stockings. "There now, see that hateful old shoe, Mamsie?" And she thrust out one foot in dismay. "What's the matter with it?" said Mrs. Pepper, straightening the things on the bureau. "You haven't worn it out already, Polly?" "Oh, no," said Polly with a little laugh. "I hope not yet, but it's these dreadful, hateful old buttons." She twitched the boot off with from her foot with such an impatient little pull that 3 or 4 more went flying under the bed. "There now, there's a lot more. I don't care. I wish they'd all go. They might as well," she cried, tossing that boot on the floor with an intense scorn, while she investigated the state of the other one. "Are they all off?" asked Phronsie, pulling herself up out of the little heap in the middle of the bed, and leaning over the side where she viewed Polly sorrowfully. "Every one, Polly?" "No," said Polly, "but I wish they were, mean old things. When I was going down to play a duet with Jasper, we should have had a good long time before breakfast. Oh, mayn't I go just once, Mamsie? Nobody'll see me if I tuck my foot under the piano, and I could sew 'em on afterwards. There will be plenty of time. Do, just once, Mamsie." "No," said Mrs. Pepper firmly. "There isn't any time but now. Piano playing isn't very nice when you've got to stick your toes under it to keep your shoes on." "Well, then," grumbled Polly, hopping around in her stocking feet, "where is the work-basket, Mamsie? Oh, it is on the window seat." A rattle of spools, scissors, and necessary utensils showed plainly that Polly had found it, followed by a jumble of words and despairing exclamations as she groped hurriedly under the chairs and tables to collect the scattered contents. When she got back with a very red face, she found Phronsie, who had crawled out of bed, sitting down on the floor in her little nightgown and examining the boot with profound interest. "I can sew 'em, Polly," she said, holding up her hand for the big needle that Polly was trying to thread. "I can now, truly. Let me, Polly, do." "Dear no," said Polly with a little laugh, beginning to be very much ashamed. "What could you do with your little mites of hands pulling this big thread through that old leather? There, scamper into bed again. You'll catch cold out here." "'Tisn't very cold," said Phronsie, tucking up her toes under the nightgown. But Polly hurried her into bed, where she curled herself up under the clothes, watching her make a big knot. But the knot didn't stay, for when Polly drew up the long thread triumphantly to the end, out it flew, and away the button hopped again, as if glad to be released. And then the thread kinked horribly and got all twisted up in disagreeable little snarls that took all Polly's patience to unravel. "It's because you're in such a hurry," said Mrs. Pepper, who was getting Phronsie's clothes. And coming over across the room, she got down on one knee and looked over Polly's shoulder. "There now, let Mother see what's the matter." "Oh, dear," said Polly, resigning the needle with a big sigh and leaning back to take a good stretch, followed by Phronsie's sympathizing eyes. "They'll never'll be on. And there goes the first bell," as the loud sounds under Jane's vigorous ringing pealed up over the stairs. There won't be time anyway now. I wish there wasn't such a thing as shoes in the world." And she gave a flounce and sat up straight in front of her mother. "Polly," said Mrs. Pepper sternly, deftly fastening the little buttons tightly into place with quick, firm stitches. "Better be glad you've got them to sew at all. Here they are. These won't come off in a hurry." "Oh, Mamsie," cried Polly, ignoring for a moment the delights of the finished shoe, to fling her arms around her mother's neck and give her a good hug. "You're just the splendidest, goodest Mamsie in the world. And I'm a hateful, cross old bear, so I am. she cried remorsefully, buttoning herself into her boots. Which done, she flew at the rest of her preparations and tried to make up for lost time. But 'twas all of no use. The day seemed to be always just racing ahead of her, and turning a corner before she could catch up to it, and Ben and the other boys only caught dissolving views of her as she flitted through halls or over stairs. "Where's Polly?" said Percy at last, coming with great dissatisfaction in his voice to the library door. "We've called her and called her, I guess 1,000,000 times, and she won't hurry." "What do you want her to have her do?" asked Jasper, looking up from the sofa where he had flung himself with a book. "Why, she said she'd make Van and me our sails, you know," said Percy, holding up a rather forlorn-looking specimen of a boat, which the boys had carved with the greatest enthusiasm. "And we want her now." "Can't you let her alone till she's ready to come?" said Jasper quickly. "You're always teasing her to do something," he added. "I didn't tease," said Percy indignantly, coming up to the sofa, boat in hand, to enforce his words. "She said she'd love to do 'em, so there, Jasper King." "Coming, coming," sang Polly over the stairs and bobbing into the library. "Oh, here you are, Percy. I couldn't come before. Mamsie wanted me. Now, says I, for the sails." And she began to flap out a long white piece of cotton cloth, on the table to trim into just the desired shape. "That isn't the way," said Percy, crowding up, the brightness that had flashed over his face at Polly's appearance beginning to fade. "Oh, those won't be good for anything. Those ain't sails." "I haven't finished," said Polly, stamping away vigorously and longing to get back to Mamsie. "Wait till they're done, then they'll be good as can be." "And it's bad enough to have to make them," put in Jasper, flinging aside his book and rolling over to watch them, "without having to be found fault with every second, Percy." "They're too big," said Percy, surveying them critically, and then looking at his boat. "Oh, that corner's coming off," cried Polly cheerfully, giving it a sharp cut that sent it flying on the floor. "And they won't be too big when they're done, Percy, all hemmed and everything. There," as she held one up for inspection. "That's just the way I used to make Ben's and mine when we sailed boats." "Is it?" asked Percy, looking with more respect at the piece of cloth Polly was waving alluringly before him. "Just exactly like it, Polly?" "Yes," said Polly, laying it down again for a pattern. "Oh, how does this go? Oh, that's it. There, yes. Yes, this is just exactly like Benzy's and mine. That was when I was ever so little, and then I used to make Joel's and Davy's afterwards, and were theirs just like this?" asked Percy, laying his hand on the sail she had finished cutting out. "Precisely," said Polly with a pin in her mouth. "Just as like as 2 peas, Percy Whitney." "Then I like them," cried Percy, veering around and regarding them with great satisfaction, as Van bounded in with a torrent of complaints and great disappointment in every line of his face. "Oh, now that's too bad," he cried, seeing Polly fold up the remaining bits of cloth and pick up the scraps on the floor. "And you've gone and let her cut out every one of 'em, and never told me a word. You're a mean, old, hateful thing, Percy Whitney." "Oh, don't," said Polly on her knees on the floor. "I forgot," began Percy, "and she cut 'em so quick, and I've been waiting," said Van in a loud, wrathful key, "and waiting and waiting." "Never mind, Van," said Jasper consolingly, getting off from the sofa and coming up to the table. "They're done, and done beautifully, aren't they?" he said, holding up one. But this only proved fresh fuel for the fire of Van's indignation. "And you shan't have 'em so," he cried, making a lunge at the one on the table, "for I'd made most of the boat. There." "Oh, no, you didn't," cried Percy in the greatest alarm, hanging on to the boat in his hand. "I cut all the keel and the bow and the bow, and—" "Oh, dear," said Polly in extreme dismay, looking at Jasper. "Come, I'll tell you boys what I'll do." "What?" said Van, cooling off a little and allowing Percy to edge into a corner with the beloved boat and one sail. "What will you, Polly?" "I'll make you another pair of sails," said Polly, groaning within herself at the thought of the wasted minutes. "And then you can see me cut 'em, Van." "Will you really?" he said, delight coming all over his flushed face. "Yes, I will," cried Polly. "Wait a minute till I get some more cloth." And she started for the door. "Oh, now, that's too bad," said Jasper, "to have to cut more of those tiresome old things. Van, let her off." Oh, no, I won't. I won't, he cried in the greatest alarm, running up to her as she stood by the door. You did say so, Polly. You know you did. Of course I did, Vanny, said Polly, smiling down into his eager face. And we'll have a splendid pair in just 1 minute, she sang. And so the sails were cut out, and the hems turned down and basted, and tucked away into Polly's little work basket, ready for the sewing on the morrow. And then Mr. King came in and took Jasper off with him, and the two Whitney boys went up to Mamma for a story, and Polly sat down in Mamsie's room to tackle her French exercise. Poor Polly. She suddenly gained 3 additional younger brothers. Last chapter, Polly's Big Bundle. What the fuck? What is that? Oh, it's the fly. The fly is back. Get over here, you little bastard. No. The return. I didn't get it. What? Come here. Oh, I almost launched the book. Hold on. Where'd you go, you? Stay over there. It starts coming at me, and then it's like, oh, just kidding, and flies out of the way. Little bastard. Okay. Polly's Big Bundle. The room was very quiet, but presently Phronsie strayed in, and seeing Polly studying, climbed up in a chair by the window to watch the birds hop over the veranda and pick up worms in the grass beside the carriage drive. And then came Mrs. Pepper with the big mending basket, and ensconced herself on the opposite by the table, and nothing was to be heard but the tick, tick, tick of the clock, and an occasional dropping of a spool of thread or scissors from the busy hands flying in and out among the stockings. All of a sudden there was a great rustling in Cherry's cage that swung in the big window on the other side of the room, and then he set up a loud and angry chirping, flying up and down and opening his mouth as if he wanted to express his mind but couldn't, and otherwise acting in a very strange and unaccountable manner. Dear me, said Mrs. Pepper, what's that? It's Cherry, said Polly, lifting up her head from Fasquelle, and oh, dear me! And flinging down the pile of books in her lap on a chair, she rushed across the room and flew up to the cage and began to wildly gesticulate and explain and shower down on him every endearing name she could think of. What is the matter? Asked her mother, turning around in her chair in perfect astonishment. What upon earth, Polly? How could I? Said Polly in accents of despair, not heeding her mother's question. Oh, Mamsie, will he die, do you think? I guess not, said Mrs. Pepper, laying down her work and coming up to the cage, while Phronsie scrambled off from her chair and hurried to the scene. Why does he act? Why, he does act queer, don't he? Perhaps he's been eating too much. Eating, said Polly. Oh, Mamsie, he hasn't had anything. She pointed with shame and remorse to the seed cup with only a few dried husks in the very bottom. Oh, Polly, began Mrs. Pepper, but seeing the look on her face, she changed her tone for one more cheerful. Well, hurry and get him some now. He'll be all right, poor little thing, in a minute. There, there, she said, nodding persuasively to the cage. You pretty creature, so you shan't be starved. At the word starved, Polly winced as though a pin had been pointed at her. There isn't any Mamsie in the house, she stammered. He had the last yesterday. And you forgot him today? Asked Mrs. Pepper, with a look in her black eyes Polly didn't like. Yes, she said poor Polly in a low voice. Well, he must have something right away, said Mrs. Pepper, decidedly. That's certain. I'll run right down to Fletcher's and get it, cried Polly. Won't take me but a minute, Mamsie. Jasper's gone and Thomas too, so I've got to go, she added as she saw her mother hesitate. If you could wait till Ben gets home, said Mrs. Pepper slowly. I'm most afraid it will rain, Polly. No, oh no, Mamsie, cried Polly, feeling as if she could fly to the ends of the earth to atone. and longing beside for the brisk walk down to town. Going up to the window, she pointed triumphantly to the little bit of blue sky still visible. There, now, see, it can't rain yet a while. Well, said Mrs. Pepper, while Phronsie, standing in a chair with her face pressed close to the cage, was telling Cherry through the bars not to be hungry, please don't, which he didn't seem to mind in the least, but went on screaming harder than ever. And besides, 'tisn't much use to wait for Ben. Nobody knows where he'll get shoes to fit himself and Joe and Davy in one afternoon. But be sure, Polly, to hurry, for it's getting late, and I shall be worried about you. Oh, Mamsie, said Polly, turning back just a minute. I know the way to Fletcher's just as easy as anything. I couldn't get lost. I know you do, said Mrs. Pepper, but it'll be dark early on account of the shower. Well, she said, pulling out her well-worn purse from her pocket, if it does sprinkle, you get into a car, Polly, remember. Oh, yes, I will, she cried, taking the purse. And there's 10 cents for your bird seed in that pocket, said Mrs. Pepper, pointing to a coin racing away into a corner by itself. Yes, said Polly, wild to be off. And there's a 5-cent piece in that one for you to ride up with, said her mother, tying up the purse carefully. Remember, for you to ride up with. Well, I guess you better ride up anyway, Polly, come to think, and then you'll get home all the quicker. Where are you going? Asked Phronsie, who, on seeing the purse, knew there was some expedition on foot, and beginning to clamber down out of the chair. Oh, I want to go too, I do. Take me, Polly. Oh, no, Pet, I can't, cried Polly. I've got to hurry like everything. I can hurry too, cried Phronsie, drawing her small figure to its utmost height. Oh, so fast, Polly. And it's ever so far, cried Polly in despair, as she saw the small under lip of the child begin to quiver. Oh, dear me, Mamsie, what shall I do? Run right along, said Mrs. Pepper briskly. Now, Phronsie, you and I ought to take care of Cherry, poor thing. At this, Phronsie turned and wiped away 2 big tears, while she gazed up at the cage in extreme commiseration. I guess I'll give him a piece of bread, said Mrs. Pepper to herself. At this word, bread, Polly, who was halfway down the hall, came running back. Oh, Mamsie, don't, she said. It made him sick before. Don't you know it? Don't you know it did? So fat and stuffy. Well, hurry along then, said Mrs. Pepper, and Polly was off. Yeah, you shouldn't give bread to birds. Cracked corn to ducks is a good thing, not bread. Over the ground she sped, only intent on reaching the bird store, her speed heightened by the dark and rolling bank of cloud that seemed to shut right down suddenly over her and envelop her warningly. It's good I've got the money to ride up with, she thought to herself, hurrying along through the busy streets, filled now with anxious crowds homeward rushing to avoid the threatening shower. Well, here I am, she said with a sigh of relief, as she at last reached Mr. Fletcher's big bird store. Here she steadily resisted all temptations to stop and look at the new arrival of birds, and to feed the carrier pigeons who seemed to be expecting her, and who turned up their soft eyes at her reproachfully when she failed to pay her respects to them. Even the cunning blandishments of a very attractive monkey that had always entertained the children on their numerous visits failed to interest her now. Mamsie would be worrying, she knew, and besides, the sight of so many birds eating their suppers out of generously full seed cups only filled her heart with remorse as she thought of poor Cherry and his empty one. So she put down her 10 cents silently on the counter and took up the little package of seed and went out. But what a change! The cloud that had seemed but a cloud when she went in was now fast descending in big ominous sprinkles that told of a heavy shower to follow. Quick and fast they came, making everybody fly to the nearest shelter. I don't care, said Polly to herself, holding fast her little package. I'll run and get in the car, then I'll be all right. So she went on with nimble footsteps, dodging the crowd, and soon came to the corner. A car was just in sight. That was fine. Polly put her hand in her pocket for her purse to have it all ready, but as quickly drew it out again and stared wildly at the car which she allowed to pass by. Her pocket was empty. Oh dear, she said to herself as a sudden gust of wind blew around the corner and warned her to move on. Now what shall I do? Well, I must hurry. Nothing for it but to run now. And secretly glad at the chance for a good hearty run along the hard pavements, a thing she had been longing to do ever since she came to the city, Polly gathered her bundle of seed up under her arm and set out for a jolly race. She was enjoying it hugely when a sudden turn of the corner brought her up against a gentleman who, having his umbrella down to protect his face, hadn't seen her till it was too late. Polly never could tell how it was done, but the first thing she knew she was being helped up from the wet, slippery pavement by a kind hand, and a gentleman's voice said in the deepest concern, "I beg your pardon. It was extremely careless of me." "It's no matter," said Polly, hopping up with a little laugh and straightening her hat, "only—" and she began to look for her parcel that had been sent spinning. "What is it?" said the gentleman, bending down and beginning to explore, too, in the darkness. "My bundle," began Polly. "Oh, dear!" No need to ask for it now. There lay the paper, wet and torn, down at their feet. The seed lay all over the pavement, scattered far and wide, even out to the puddles in the street, and not a cent of money to get any more with. The rain that was falling around them as they stood there sent with the sound of every drop a flood of misery into Polly's heart. "What was it, child?" asked the gentleman, peering sharply to find out what the little shiny things were. "Bird seed," gasped Polly. "Is that all?" said the gentleman with a happy laugh. "I'm very glad." "All?" Polly's heart stood still as she thought of Cherry, stark and stiff in the bottom of his cage if he didn't get it soon. "Now," said the kind tones briskly, "come, little girl, we'll make this all right speedily. See, here's a bird store. Now then—" "But, sir—" began Polly, holding back. Even Cherry had better die than to do anything her mother wouldn't like. But the gentleman already had her in the shop, and was delighting the heart of the shopkeeper by ordering him to do up a big package of all kinds of seed. Then he added a cunning arrangement for birds to swing in, and 2 or 3 other things that didn't have anything to do with birds at all. And then they came out on the wet, slippery street again. "Now then, little girl," said the gentleman, tucking the bundle under his arm and opening the umbrella. Then he took hold of Polly's hand, who by this time was glad of a protector. "Where do you live? For I'm going to take you safely home this time, where umbrellas can't run into you." "Oh," said Polly with a little skip. "Thank you, sir. It's up to Mr. King's, and—" "What?" said the gentleman, stopping short in the midst of an immense puddle and staring at her. "Mr. Jasper King's?" "I don't know, sir," said Polly, "what his other name is, but yes, it must be Jasper. That's what Jappy's is, anyway," she added with a little laugh, wishing very much that she could see Jappy at that identical moment. "Jappy," said the stranger, still standing as if petrified. "And are there little Whitney children in the same house?" "Oh, yes," said Polly, raising her clear brown eyes up at him. The gaslighter was just beginning his rounds, and the light from a neighboring lamp flashed full on Polly's face as she spoke, showing just how clear and brown the eyes were. "There's Percy and Van and little Dick. Oh, he's so cunning," she cried impulsively. The gentleman's face looked very queer just then, but he merely said, "Why, you must be Polly." "Yes, sir, I am," said Polly, pleased to think he knew her. Then she told him how she'd forgotten Cherry's seed and all about it. "And oh, sir," she said, and her voice began to tremble, "Mamsie'll be so frightened if I don't get there soon." "I'm going up there myself, so it all happens very nicely," said the gentleman, commencing to start off briskly and grasping her hand tighter. "Now then, Polly." So off they went at a very fast pace, she skipping through the puddles that his long, even strides carried him safely over, chattered away by his side under the umbrella, and answered his many questions, and altogether got so very well acquainted that by the time they turned in at the old stone gateway, she felt as if she had known him for years. And there, the first thing either of them saw, down in the little corner back of the tall evergreens, was a small heap that rose as they splashed up the carriage drive and resolved itself into a very red dress and a very white apron, as it rushed impulsively up and flung itself into Polly's wet arms. "And I was so tired waiting, Polly." "Oh, dear me, Phronsie," cried Polly, huddling her up from the dark, wet ground. "You'll catch your death. What will Mamsie say?" The stranger, amazed at this new stage of the proceedings, was vainly trying to hold the umbrella over both till the procession could move on again. "Oh," cried Phronsie, shaking her yellow head decidedly, "they're all looking for you, Polly." She pointed one finger solemnly up at the big carved door she spoke, and at that Polly gathered her up close and began to walk with rapid footsteps up the path. Do let me carry you, little girl, said Polly's kind friend persuasively, bending down to the little face on Polly's neck. Oh, no, 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 said Phronsie, at each syllable grasping Polly around the throat in perfect terror, and waving him off with a very crumpled, mangy bit of paper that had already done duty to wipe off the copious tears during her anxious watch. Don't let him, Polly, don't. There shan't anything hurt you, said Polly, kissing her reassuringly, and stepping briskly off with her burden, just as the door burst open, and Joel flew out on the veranda steps, followed by the rest of the troop in the greatest state of excitement. Oh, wicketies, she's come, he shouted, springing up to her over the puddles and crowding under the umbrella. Where'd you get Phronsie? He asked, standing quite still at the sight of the little feet tucked up to get out of the rain. Without waiting for an answer, he turned and shot back into the house, proclaiming in stentorian tones, Ma, Polly's come, and she's got Phronsie, and an awful big man, and they're out by the gate. Phronsie, said Mrs. Pepper, springing to her feet. Why, I thought she was upstairs with Jane. Now somebody, exclaimed old Mr. King, who sat by the library table vainly trying to read a newspaper, which he now threw down in extreme irritation as he rose quickly and went to the door to welcome the wanderers. Somebody ought to watch that poor child, whose business it is to know where she is. She's caught her death cold, no doubt, no doubt. Outside, in the rain, the children revolved around Polly and Phronsie, hugging and kissing them until nobody could do much more than breathe, not seeming to notice the stranger, who stood quietly waiting till such time as he could be heard. At last, in a lull in the scramble, they were dragging Polly and her burden up the steps, each wild for the honor of escorting her into the house. He cried out in laughing tones, Isn't anybody going to kiss me, I wonder? The two little Whitneys, who were eagerly clutching Polly's arms, turned around, and Percy rubbed his eyes in a puzzled way, as Joel said, stopping a minute to look up at the tall figure, We don't ever kiss strangers. Mamsie's told us not to. For shame, Joey, cried Polly, feeling her face grow dreadfully red in the darkness. The gentleman's been so kind to me. You're right, my boy, said the stranger, laughing and bending down to Joel's upturned, sturdy countenance, at the same instant that Mrs. Pepper flung open the big door, and a bright, warm light fell straight across his handsome face, and then... Well, then Percy gave a violent bound, and upsetting Joel as he did so, wriggled his way down the steps, at the same time that Van, on Polly's other side, rushed up to the gentleman. Papa! Oh, Papa! Polly, halfway up the steps, turned round, and then, at the rush of the feeling that gathered at her heart, sat right down on the wet, slippery step. Why, Polly Pepper, exclaimed Joel, not minding his own upset, you're right in all the slush. Mother won't like it, I tell you. Hush, said Polly, catching his arm. He's come. Oh, Joel, he's come. Who? Cried Joel, staring around blindly. Who, Polly? Polly had just opened her lips to explain when Mr. King's portly, handsome figure appeared in the doorway. Do come in, children. Why, good gracious, Mason! Yes, cried the stranger lightly, dropping his big bundle and umbrella as he passed in the door, with his little sons clinging to him. Where is Marian? Why didn't you write? Asked the old gentleman testily. These surprises aren't the right sort of things, and he began to feel vigorously of his heart. Here, Mrs. Pepper, be so good as to call Mrs. Whitney. Pepper? Pepper, repeated Mr. Whitney perplexedly. She's coming. I hear her upstairs, cried Van Whitney. Oh, let me tell her. He struggled to get down from his father's arms as he said this. No, I shall. I heard her first, cried Percy. Oh, dear me, Grandpapa's going to. Mr. King advanced to the foot of the staircase as his daughter, all unconscious, ran down with a light step and a smile on her face. Has Polly come? She asked, seeing only her father. Yes, replied the old gentleman shortly. And she's brought a big bundle, Marian. A big bundle? She repeated wonderingly and gazing at him. A very big bundle, he said, and taking hold of her shoulders, he turned her around on her husband. So Polly and Phronsie crept in unnoticed after all. I wish Ben was here, said little Davy, capering around the Whitney group. And Jappy, I do. Where are they? Asked Polly. Don't know, said Joel, tugging at his shoestring. See, aren't these prime? He held up a shining black shoe, fairly bristling with newness, for Polly to admire. "Splendid!" she cried out heartily. "But where are the boys?" "They went after you," said Davy, "after we came home with our shoes." "No, they didn't," contradicted Joel flatly. Sitting down on the floor, he began to tie and untie his new possessions. "When we came home, Ben drew us pictures, lots of 'em, don't you know?" "Oh, yes," said Davy, nodding his head. "So he did. That was when we all cried 'cause you weren't home, Polly." "He drawed me a beautiful one," cried Phronsie, holding up her mangy bit. "See, Polly, see?" "That's the little brown house," said Davy, looking over her shoulder as Phronsie put it carefully into Polly's hand. "It's all washed out," said Polly, smoothing it out, "when you stayed out in the rain." Phronsie's face grew very grave at that. "Bad, naughty old rain," she said, and then she began to cry as hard as she could. "Oh, dear, don't!" cried Polly in dismay, trying her best to stop her. "Oh, Phronsie, do stop," she implored, pointing into the next room whence the sound of happy voices issued. "They'll all hear you." But Phronsie in her grief didn't care, but she wailed on steadily. "Who is it, anyway?" cried Joel, tired of admiring his precious shoes and getting up to hear them squeak. "That great big man, you know, Polly, that came in with you?" "Why, I thought I told you," said Polly at her wits' end over Phronsie. "It's Percy and Van's father, Joey." "Walkie!" cried Joel, completely stunned. "Really and truly, Polly Pepper?" "Really and truly," cried Polly, bundling Phronsie up in her arms to lay the little wet cheek against hers. "Then I'm going to peek," cried Joel, squeaking across the floor to carry his threat into execution. "Oh, you mustn't, Joe," cried Polly, frightened lest he should. "Come right back, or I'll tell Mamsie." "They're all coming in anyway," cried little Davy delightedly, and scuttling over to Polly's side. "And here are the little friends I've heard so much about," cried Mr. Whitney, coming in amongst them. "Oh, you needn't introduce me to Polly. She brought me home." "They're all Pepperses," said Percy, waving his hand and doing the business up at one stroke. "Only the best of 'em isn't here," observed Van rather ungallantly. "He draws perfectly elegant, Papa." "I like Polly best, I do," cried little Dick, tumbling after. "Peppers," again repeated Mr. Whitney in a puzzled way. "And here is Mrs. Pepper," said old Mr. King, pompously dragging her forward, "the children's mother, and—" But here Mrs. Pepper began to act in a very queer way, rubbing her eyes and twisting one corner of her black apron in a decidedly nervous manner that, as the old gentleman looked up, he saw with astonishment presently communicated itself to the gentleman opposite. "Is it," said Mr. Whitney, putting out his hand and grasping the hard toil-worn one in the folds of his apron, "is it Cousin Mary?" "And aren't you Cousin John?" she asked, the tears in her bright black eyes. "Of all things in this world!" cried the old gentleman, waving his head helplessly from one to the other. "Will somebody have the extreme goodness to tell us what all this means?" At this, the little Peppers crowded around their mother and into all the vacant places they could find to get near the fascinating scene. "Well," said Mr. Whitney, sitting down and drawing his wife to his side, "it's a long story. You see, when I was a little youngster and—" "You were John Whitney then," put in Mrs. Pepper slyly. "That's the reason I never knew when they were all talking of Mason Whitney." "John Whitney I was," said Mr. Whitney, laughing, "or rather Johnny and Jack, but Grandmother Mason, when I grew older, wanted me called by my middle name to please my grandfather. But to go back, when I was a little shaver about as big as Percy here—" "Oh, Papa," began Percy deprecatingly, to be called a little shaver before all the others. "He means, dearie," said his mamma reassuringly, "when he was a little boy like you. Now hear what Papa is going to say. Well, I was sent up into Vermont to stay at the old place. There was a little girl there, a bright black-eyed little girl. She was my cousin, and her name was Mary Bartlett." "Who's Mary Bartlett?" asked Joel, interrupting. "There she is, sir," said Mr. Whitney, pointing to Mrs. Pepper, who was laughing and crying together. "Where?" said Joel, utterly bewildered. "I don't see any Mary Bartlett. What does he mean, Polly?" I don't know, said Polly. Wait, Joey, she whispered. He's going to tell us all about it. Well, this little cousin and I went to the district school and had many good times together. And then my parents sent for me and I went to Germany to go to school. And when I came back, I had lost sight of her. All I could find out was that she had married an Englishman by the name of Pepper. Oh, cried all the children together. And I always supposed she had gone to England, for despite all my exertions, I could find no trace of her. Ah, Mary, he said reproachfully, why didn't you let me know where you were? I heard, said Mrs. Pepper, that you'd grown awfully rich, and I couldn't. You always were a proud little thing, he said, laughing. Well, but, broke in Mr. King, unable to keep silence any longer, I'd like to inquire, Mason, why you didn't find all this out before in Marian's letters when she mentioned Mrs. Pepper. She didn't ever mention her, said Mr. Whitney, turning round to face his questioner. Not as Mrs. Pepper, never once by name. It was always either Polly's mother or Phronsie's mother. Just like a woman, he added, with a mischievous glance at his wife, not to be explicit. Really, dude. And just like a man, she retorted with a happy little laugh, not to ask for explanations. Oh, I hear Jappy, cried Polly in a glad voice, and Ben. Oh, good, as the sound of rushing footsteps was heard over the veranda steps and down the long hall. The door was thrown suddenly open, and Jasper plunged in, his face flushed with excitement, and after him Ben, looking a little as he did when Phronsie was lost, while Prince squeezed panting in between the two boys. Has Polly got? Began Jasper. Oh, yes, I'm here, cried Polly, springing up to them. Oh, Ben. She has, cried Joel, disentangling himself from the group. Don't you see, Jappy? She's all home, echoed Phronsie, flying up. Oh, Ben, do draw me another little house. And see, cried the little Whitneys, pointing with jubilant fingers to their papa. See what she brought? Jasper turned around at that, and then rushed forward. Oh, Brother Mason! Well, Jasper, said Mr. Whitney, a whole wealth of affection beaming on the boy, how you've stretched up in 6 months. Haven't I? Said Jasper, laughing and drawing himself up to his fullest height. He's a-standin' on tiptoe, said Joel critically, who was hovering near. I most know he is. And he bent down to examine the position of Jasper's heels. Not a bit of it, Joe, cried Jasper with a merry laugh, and setting both feet with a convincing thud on the floor. Well, anyway, I'll be just as big, cried Joel, when I'm 13, so. Just then a loud and quick rap on the table made all the children skip and stopped everybody's tongue. It came from Mr. King. Phronsie, said he, come here, child. I can't do anything without you. And he held out his hand. Phronsie immediately left Ben, who was hanging over Polly, as if he never meant to let her go out of his sight again, and went directly over to the old gentleman's side. Now then. He swung her upon his shoulder, where she perched like a little bird, gravely surveying the whole group. One little hand stole around the old gentleman's neck and patted his cheek softly, which so pleased him that for a minute or two he stood perfectly still so that everybody might see it. Now, Phronsie, you must tell all these children so that they'll understand. Say everything just as I tell you, mind. I will, said Phronsie, shaking her small head wisely. Every single thing. Well, then, now begin. Well, then, now begin, said Phronsie, looking down on the faces with an air as much like Mr. King's as was possible, finishing up with 2 or 3 little nods. Oh, no, dear, that isn't it, cried the old gentleman. I'll tell you. Say, Phronsie, you're all cousins, everyone. You're all cousins, everyone, repeated little Phronsie, simply shaking her yellow head into the very middle of the group. Does she mean it, Grandpapa? Does she mean it? Cried Percy in the greatest excitement. As true as everything? Demanded Joel, crowding in between them. As true as truth? Said the old gentleman solemnly, patting the child's little fat hand. So make the most of it. Oh, said Polly with a long sigh, and then Jasper and she took hold of hands and had a good spin. Joel turned around with 2 big eyes on Percy. We're cousins, he said. Hi, Raven. How are you? I know it, said Percy, and so's Van. Yes, said Van, flying up, and I'm cousin to Polly, too. That's the best. Can't I be a cousin? Cried little Dick, crowding up with two red cheeks. Isn't anybody going to be a cousin to me, too? Everybody but Jasper, said the old gentleman, laughing heartily at them. You and I, my boy, he turned to his son, are left out in the cold. At this, a scream loud and terrible to hear struck upon them all, as Joel flung himself flat on the floor. Isn't Jappy our cousin? I want Jappy! Goodness, exclaimed the old gentleman in the greatest alarm. What is the matter with the boy? Do somebody stop him. Joel, said Jasper, leaning over him and trying to help Polly lift him up, I'll tell you how we'll fix it. I'll be your brother. That's best of all. Brother to Polly and Ben and the whole of you. Then we'll see. Joel bolted up at that and began to smile through the tears running down the rosy face. Will you really? He said, just like Ben and everything? I can't be as good as Ben, said Jappy, laughing, but I'll be a real brother like him. Pooh, then I don't care, cried Joel, wiping off the last tear on the back of his chubby hand. Now I guess we're better'n you, he exclaimed with a triumphant glance over at the little Whitneys, as he began to make the new shoes skip at a lively pace up and down the long room. Oh dear, they both cried in great distress. Now, Papa, Jappy's going to be Joey's brother, and he isn't anything but our old uncle. Make him be ours more, Papa, do. And then Polly sprang up. Oh, dearie me! And she rushed out into the hall and began to tug violently at the big bundle, tossed down in a corner. Cherry'll die! Cherry'll die! She cried. Do somebody help me off with the string! But Polly already had it off by the time Jasper's knife was half out of his pocket, and was kneeling down on the floor, scooping out a big handful of the seed. Don't hurry so, Polly, said Jasper as she jumped up to fly upstairs. He's had a perfect age. He's all right. What? Said Polly, stopping so suddenly that 2 or 3 little seeds flew out of the outstretched hand and went dancing away at the foot of the stairs by themselves. Oh, I heard him scolding away there when I first came home, said Jasper, so I just ran down a block or 2 and got him some. Is that all there is in that big bundle? Said Joel in a disappointed tone, who had followed with extreme curiosity to see its contents. Pooh, that's no fun. It's old bird seed. I know, said Polly with a gay little laugh, pointing with a handful of seed into the library. But I shouldn't have met the other big bundle if it hadn't been for this, Joe. The end. Life be lifing, but we vibing. I like that. Life do be lifing. So what's funny about this, when Jasper said, I'll be your brother, he's going to be their brother. I found out he and Polly get married in the future. So he's their brother-in-law. Oh, that was good. Yes, that was a good book. Maybe we'll read more of them. I'm not sure. Right now, I'm really, really mad at VTube Studio and such. Being all weird. All right, let's see. Who are we reading? I'm so tired. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. We haven't, you know what? We haven't visited Dr. Toto Hex in a while. And she is playing Claire Obscure. Expedition 33. So let's go read her. Why not? So I will stream again on not Friday, Saturday. We'll go back to reading Voyages Around My Room. I have to reread what I've done so far myself because I do not remember what the heck it was we left off with. So let's go visit Dr. Toto Hex and enjoy her stream. Everyone, thank you for coming in. Let me get this raid up. Dr. Toto Hex. Okay, here we go, everyone. See you on Saturday. Bye.